Everyone saw the cuffs biting into my wrists, but no one saw the small smile I gave when they clicked shut. Because if Karen Van Fleet thought she had just broken me, she had no idea what kind of man she was playing with. But that moment, the humiliation, the fake cops, the smirk on her face, that wasn't the beginning. It was the inevitable end of something that started weeks earlier, with the smell of fresh paint and the dream of a quiet life. I remember standing in my new living room, boxes stacked high like cardboard mountains. Some were labeled kitchen, others clothes. One box had my wife's handwriting across it, "Old files burn." She used to joke about how I carried too much of my job home with me. Those old files weren't junk, though. They were 2 decades of my life in law enforcement, 15 years on SWAT, the last 5 as chief of police. Commendations, case notes, fragments of a career spent chasing shadows. But this house. This was supposed to be the reward for all of it. The air smelled clean, almost sweet with paint. My boots echoed on bare floors. For the first time in years, I wasn't listening for radios crackling or sirens cutting the night. I bought this place for silence. My grandfather used to tell me a man's home was his castle, but the best castles, he said, had quiet neighbors. That was what I wanted, peace, a fresh start. And for 3 weeks I had it. Morning coffee with sunlight breaking through the oak trees lining the street. My neighbor Duke, a mountain of a man with a leaf blower that never seemed to rest, waved every morning. A young family brought cookies when we moved in. I set up a workshop in the garage, sorted through my wife's books, placed my grandpa's picture on the mantel. For the first time since she passed, I slept through the night. Then came the first paper. It was small, tucked under the wiper blade of my truck. Not the department vehicle, my personal pickup. A bright red slip of paper, words printed in bold, angry font, violation notice. My lawn, apparently, was a 1/4 inch too high. A $50 fine. Signed by one Karen Van Fleet, President, Oak Street Homeowners Association. I looked at my lawn. It was fine. Looked at my neighbors. It was the same. But there was something in the pit of my stomach, that cold tightening I'd felt 1,000 times on the job. It wasn't anger yet. It was duty. The sense that a bully had just drawn their line in the sand. I put the notice in my pocket and tried to ignore it. My day off, my house, my peace. But the next day there were 2 notices, the first again for the lawn, the second for my trash can, left visible for 3 hours past pickup. $75 more. The total climbed to $125. It wasn't about grass height or garbage. It was a test. She was pushing, probing the fence line, seeing if the new guy would roll over. The language on the notices grew harsher, immediate compliance. Further action pending. Empty words printed on cheap paper designed to scare. Most people they would work on, but not me. That afternoon I saw her. A sharp-faced woman walking a tiny dog that barked like it on the street. She stopped in front of my house, clipboard in hand, scribbling notes. Her haircut was precise enough to level a picture frame. And when she turned and saw me watching, she didn't smile. Instead, she gave me a look that said everything, smug, entitled, like a queen surveying land she believed was hers. I knew then my quiet street wasn't quiet anymore. It was occupied territory. And Karen Van Fleet wasn't a neighbor. She was a tyrant in a pink blazer. My grandfather would have called her what she was, a pocket tyrant, a small person making noise to feel big, and he'd have told me the same thing he always did, don't let weeds grow. Pull them out by the roots. But I wasn't ready to pull yet, not until I knew exactly what I was dealing with. The next morning, I drove not to the police department but to the county clerk's office. I wanted facts. Paperwork doesn't lie. Inside, the marble halls smelled of dust and truth. I asked the clerk, an older woman with glasses on a chain, for the incorporation papers of the Oak Street Homeowners Association. She typed, frowned, typed again. Then she sighed. There's no record, she said, not in this county. No record, no HOA, no covenants, no authority. Karen had built her castle on sand. I asked for a certified letter. 2 copies, official seal, notarized. The clerk gave me a smile, small but knowing. I walked out with truth in my hand, and that truth was heavier than any weapon. I could have ended it right then. Knocked on Karen's door, handed her the letter, told her to stop. But bullies don't stop. They adapt. They find new victims. My gut told me this wasn't about $50 or even one street. This was bigger. And if Karen Van Fleet wanted to play a game of rules and authority, she had no idea who she was playing against. Everyone thought I'd walk straight to her door and wave that notarized paper in her face. But that's not how you dismantle a bully. You don't slap their hand and walk away. You let them tighten the rope around their own neck. You let them believe they've won, right up until the moment they don't. On the drive home, the letter sat on my passenger seat, heavy as a loaded gun. Proof, hard fact. But facts alone don't stop people like Karen. I knew her type, loud, overconfident, convinced their word is law. Handing her proof wouldn't end it. It would only force her deeper underground, change the name, rope in new neighbors. No, I needed more. I needed her to show her entire hand. That's when I called Danny. Lieutenant Ray's my rock at the department. Sharp as a blade, calm under pressure, the kind of cop you want beside you when everything goes sideways. Danny, it's Mark, I said. She laughed. You're supposed to be on vacation, Chief. What's wrong, neighbor's roses keeping you up at night? Something like that, I said. I need a quiet background check, off the books. Woman named Karen Van Fleet, lives on my street. Danny's tone shifted instantly. What did she do? I paused. Let's just say I think I've got a weed in my new garden. I want the roots. She didn't argue, she didn't need to. You got it, no official files yet. Not yet, I said. Keep it on your desktop, just the basics, priors, financials, known associates. Her dry chuckle came through the line. So, one of your projects. My projects were legend at the precinct. The ones that started small, a rumor, a whisper, a red slip of paper, and unraveled into something bigger, darker, uglier. She knew. I knew. This was no lawn dispute anymore. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the calm had settled over me. The same cold focus I used to get sitting in the back of a SWAT van, waiting for the green light to breach. The game had shifted. That night, my house stopped being just a home. It became an observation post. From a box in my garage, I pulled gear that had nothing to do with gardening. Compact cameras, discreet enough to vanish against the eaves of the roof. Motion sensors. License plate captures, all tied into a private server. Then the personal gear, pieces I'd collected over the years. A microphone hidden in the button of a shirt. Crystal clear pickup within 50 feet. A black ring on my finger that looked like jewelry, but if I tapped it twice with my thumb, it triggered a live alert to Danny. Audio, video, GPS, all streamed instantly to her. My panic button. I'd never needed it before, but I had a feeling I was about to. By the time the system was running, I felt the calm deepen. I wasn't reacting anymore. I was preparing, and preparation is how you survive. I made one more call to Boone. Big, quiet, steady, ex-military, solid as a mountain. Boone, it's Ryland. I may need you on standby, no questions, just be ready if Ray's calls. Yes, Chief, he said simply. That was Boone, dependable, unshakable. Finally, I reached out to my neighbors. The young family, nervous but kind. Duke, across the street with his endless laugh and his leaf blower. I kept it simple. If you see any commotion at my house, film it, just from your window, for my records. Duke barked out a laugh. That woman's a piece of work, tried to find me over a garden gnome once. Don't worry, Chief, I'll keep an eye out. The young family hesitated, fear flickering in their voices. But in the end they agreed. Fear was what Karen fed on. They felt it. I wanted them to feel something else, strength. By midnight, everything was in place. Cameras, neighbors, panic button, witnesses. The pieces on the board were set. Now all I needed was for Karen to make her move. And she didn't make me wait long. The next morning, a fresh notice was taped to my door, this one different. The fine had jumped to $500. The words were harsher. Lien pending, legal action imminent. Pure intimidation, written to sound official. It was garbage, legally worthless. But garbage in the wrong hands is still a weapon. Fear doesn't need facts. I crumpled it, tossed it in the trash. My pulse didn't spike. My jaw didn't clench. I was past anger. This was chess now. And Karen had just moved her queen. That evening, as the sun dipped low and shadows stretched long across the lawns, I knew it was close. The calm before the storm hung in the air. My neighbors peeked through curtains. My cameras hummed quietly. And I sat in my living room, coffee cooling on the table, waiting. When the dark SUV rolled up the next morning, tinted windows gleaming, I knew this was it. The escalation, the trap. Two men got out, both dressed like cops, but I didn't need more than a glance to see they were. Shiny badges, mismatched numbers, crisp uniforms that didn't fit right. I'd spent 20 years watching the way real cops move. These weren't cops. They were actors, bad ones. And then I saw her. Karen Van Fleet herself, stepping out with her clipboard held like a scepter, pointing straight at my front door. Her face radiated smug triumph. This was it, the moment I'd been waiting for. I smoothed my shirt, adjusted the ring on my finger and stood. The door shook with heavy pounding. Not a knock, a demand. I opened it, looked them square in the eye, and said calmly, "Can I help you?" Everyone saw the two men on my porch. Broad shoulders, fake badges, the kind of posture meant to scream authority. But to me, they looked like kids playing dress-up. Still, they were dangerous, not because of what they were, but because of what they thought they were. The bigger one puffed out his chest. "Mark Ryland." "That's me," I answered. My voice steady, just confused enough to sell the act. "We have a warrant for your arrest," he said, waving a piece of paper like a magician flashing a trick card. I took it from him, a masterpiece of forgery, the seal, crooked, the judge's name, retired 5 years ago, and the charge, criminal defiance of community bylaws. Legal gibberish, fake authority dressed up to look terrifying. Karen stepped forward, eyes glittering, smile razor-sharp. "You were warned, Mr. Ryland. We don't tolerate lawbreakers on Oak Street. You've brought this on yourself. Now, are you going to comply, or are we going to have to do this the hard way?" I looked at her, then at the two men gripping their prop handcuffs. They thought they were lions. They didn't realize they were sheep walking into the slaughterhouse. Still, I raised my hand slowly. Surrender, neutral face, calm tone. "No trouble," I said, "I'll comply." Relief spread across their faces. They expected a fight, shouting, resistance, fear. They didn't know what to do with quiet compliance. The bigger one fumbled with the cuffs. Shiny, cheap metal. He wrenched my arms behind my back too hard, the bite of steel on skin. I didn't flinch. Instead, I turned my head, met Karen's eyes, and smiled. Not a big grin. Just the small, knowing curl of a man who already knows how this ends. The smile cut her like glass, her lips tightened. "Wipe that stupid grin off your face," she spat. They yanked me down the porch, down the sidewalk. A perp walk. That was the point. Neighbors watching through curtains, phones in their hands. Karen wanted everyone to see me humiliated, to see her victory. But humiliation is only humiliation if it's real. What she didn't know was that I wanted the same thing for everyone to see. Across the street, Duke stood on his porch, coffee mug in one hand, phone in the other. He angled the camera high, capturing it all. The young family next door peered from their blinds, phone lenses glinting in the sun. My cameras caught every angle. My button mic recorded every word. The evidence was a symphony. Karen didn't notice. She was too busy drinking in the moment. As they marched me toward the SUV, my thumb brushed the ring on my finger. 2 taps. The signal went out. Miles away, Danny's phone lit up. My feeds opened in real time. She could see what I saw, hear what I heard, and she knew the trap had been sprung. "You're making a big mistake," I said loud enough for the mic to capture it clearly. "Impersonating a police officer is a felony in this state." The smaller man laughed, sharp and ugly. "Shut up, old man. The only one making a mistake here is you." They shoved me into the SUV. The door slammed shut. Karen stood outside, arms folded, savoring her triumph. She thought it was over, but she'd just handed me everything. The SUV pulled away, tires crunching against asphalt. Inside smelled of cheap coffee and a pine-scented air freshener. The driver talked into his phone, voice low. "Yeah, we got him. No problem. Heading to the spot now." The spot, the words hung heavy. They weren't just staging intimidation. This was abduction, kidnapping, and every second was recorded. The passenger twisted in his seat, sneer plastered on his face. "Not so tough now, are you, Mr. Ryland? Should have paid the fine, would have been easier." I stared back at him, said nothing. Silence is its own weapon. Bullies feed on reactions, fear, anger. When you give them nothing, they choke on it. He scoffed, turned away. The SUV rattled through familiar streets, deeper toward the industrial park. My city, my home, and while they thought they were delivering me to some lonely place, I knew better. My team was already moving. Danny coordinating, Boone shadowing in his unmarked truck, ghost cars slotting into position like chess pieces. They thought they were playing checkers. I was already 3 moves from checkmate. When they forced me toward the SUV earlier, I'd stumbled on purpose, pressing my cuffed hands against the bumper. In that moment, I slid a tracker into place. A small magnetic disc, powerful enough to send my location for weeks. Now it pulsed live, feeding Danny's map, leading my officers right to me. The driver bragged about their payment, $500 for this little job, arguing with his partner about whether to blow it on beer or video games. Small men with small ambitions, but their crimes, those weren't small. The SUV turned sharp into the industrial district, warehouses rising like gray tombstones. The perfect kill zone. The passenger leaned back again, voice low, menacing. "When we let you go, you're gonna forget this happened. You're gonna go home, pay your fines, and never call the cops. Understand, because we know where you live." It was the last piece I needed. Extortion, threat, all recorded, tied to their voices, their faces. A package of felonies tied up with a bow. I leaned back, closed my eyes, breathed slow, steady, the same way I had in 1,000 SWAT vans before a breach. Calm wasn't optional, it was survival. They thought they were driving me deeper into fear. What they didn't know was that every turn of their tires only drove them closer to the end. The SUV slowed as we rolled deeper into the industrial park. Rows of gray warehouses, empty lots, cracked asphalt. It was the kind of place chosen for what it didn't have. Witnesses, cameras, neighbors. The driver muttered, annoyed, weaving through the deserted stretch. He thought he was in control. He had no idea control was already gone. Outside, my people were moving. Quiet, precise, the way real cops do. I felt the faint buzz in my shoe, my haptic receiver. One short pulse, Danny's signal, takedown initiated. The first move came subtle. A construction van pulled out from a side street ahead, crawling slow, forcing our driver to ease off the gas. He cursed under his breath, irritation creeping in. Behind us, a black sedan eased up close, bumper tight. To the left, a dark pickup slid into the lane. I knew that truck. Boone, calm, hands on the wheel, steady as stone. In 2 heartbeats, we were boxed in. The driver's hands tightened on the wheel. "What the hell?" he started, but never finished. The van in front slammed its brakes. Tires screamed. Our SUV jolted hard, seatbelt digging into my chest. Behind us, the sedan closed in, locking us tight. Boone's truck swerved, cutting the last escape. We were stopped, trapped. The doors around us flew open. Men and women spilled out in fluid, deadly motion. Not the sloppy swagger of imposters, real cops, tactical vests, weapons leveled, voices overlapping in a thunder of authority. "Police, show me your hands, do it now." The air exploded with command. Shouts from every angle, each sharp enough to pierce bone. It was overwhelming by design. Shock the system. Break the will before resistance can even form. The driver froze, knuckles white on the wheel. The passenger's head whipped around, eyes wide, face drained of color. The tough guy's smirk gone, All that remained was panic. Hands on the dash, Boone's voice cut clean through the chaos. Calm, firm, unquestionable. The driver obeyed, trembling. The passenger followed, hands shaking so badly they rattled against the plastic. The back doors wrenched open. 2 officers were there, weapons trained, eyes sharp. One was a young kid from the academy, but his stance was steady, solid. He looked at me. "Chief, you okay, sir?" I nodded. "I'm fine, get me out of these things." He unlocked the cheap cuffs. The metal clattered to the ground. I rubbed my wrists, circulation flooding back. Then I stepped out of the SUV and into the storm. Blue uniforms, tactical black, the smell of hot asphalt and adrenaline in the air. A controlled chaos I'd lived 100 times before, but this time I wasn't running it from behind a radio. I was in it. And in that moment, I stopped being the victim. I wasn't the man in cuffs anymore. I was the chief of police, and this was my scene. The driver and passenger were yanked from the SUV, shoved against the hood, cuffed for real this time. One blubbered excuses. "It was just a joke, man, just trying to scare him." His voice cracked, desperate. The other stayed silent, eyes hard but empty. He knew the game was over. Boone came to me holding a clear evidence bag. "Weapons, chief." Passenger had a convincing airsoft pistol. Driver had this under the seat. Inside the bag, a real 9 serial number filed off. My gut tightened. What began as impersonation and intimidation had just escalated to federal firearms violations. This wasn't neighborhood harassment anymore. This was felonies stacked on felonies. "Good work," I said, voice low, steady. "Toss the vehicle, piece by piece." Danny's car pulled up unmarked. She stepped out, phone to her ear, expression sharp. She gave me a small nod, the kind only cops know. It meant, "We've got them, what's next?" I walked with her toward the SUV. They admitted they were paid, they threatened me. "We've got impersonation, kidnapping, extortion, firearms. That's more than enough for a warrant. I want her house, her car, her financials, every scrap." Danny was already typing, efficient as ever. On it, judge's line is live. The scene was humming now, crime scene tape unfurling, forensic suits swarming. Officers cataloging, bagging, photographing. It wasn't just procedure. It was building the wall brick by brick. A wall that Karen Van Fleet wouldn't climb over. From the back of the cruiser, I watched the driver's eyes flick to me, wide with fear. He saw the badge on my belt, the authority in my stance. His world was crumbling. "You're looking at 20 years minimum," I said quietly through the open door. "Federal time for the gun, state time for kidnapping, 30 years if you're lucky, unless you talk first." Tears welled in his eyes. He shook his head, silent. But doubt had already taken root. Doubt that his partner would turn on him first. Doubt that loyalty could survive decades in a cell. Divide and conquer, classic interrogation. It wasn't cruelty, it was strategy. And Karen Van Fleet. She wasn't just losing her hired help tonight. She was losing the foundation of her little empire. Because now, the queen herself was in my sights. Everyone thought the takedown was the end. Neighbors would have cheered if they'd seen those 2 hauled off in cuffs. But I knew better. Pawns don't build kingdoms. Pawns don't print forged documents or invent fake bylaws out of thin air. No, this was bigger, and the queen was still in play. The SUV sat in the middle of the taped-off lot, floodlights bathing it in harsh white. My forensics team moved like ghosts around it, white suits glowing, brushes and gloves careful on every surface. Boone stood beside me, calm as always, watching. "Want to start interviews?" he asked. I shook my head. "Not yet, let them sweat, that car will talk before they do." And it did. The first discovery was in the glove compartment. A thick stack of violation notices, identical to the ones I'd found on my windshield. Blank spaces left for the offense and the fine, printed in bulk, ready to terrorize the next homeowner. Beneath the papers, a binder. Inside, crude maps of neighborhoods, some with houses circled, my house outlined in red. A target list. The second discovery was under the back seat, a lockbox. Boone popped it open with a crowbar, metal screeching in the night. Inside, dozens of cheap fake badges that would fool anyone at a glance, and next to them, wads of cash, rubber-banded into bundles. Boone flipped through them, whistling low. "Over $5,000 here, Chief. Each bundle's got a sticky note, looks like addresses." I flipped one open. A note read, "Maple Lane Holiday Lights Violation, $150. Another, Willow Creek Mailbox Paint, $200. Extortion money, receipts, a paper trail written in cash and fear." But the third discovery, that was the thread we needed. A burner phone tucked in the driver's side pocket. Password protected. Danny was on it instantly. She filed for an e-warrant, the judge signed within minutes, and our tech team began extraction on the spot. When the first messages appeared on the screen, my stomach hardened. The last call made before they showed up at my house was to a number labeled K Boss, registered to none other than Karen Van Fleet. But worse than that, a text 20 minutes old. "Is it done? Is the trash taken out?" Trash, that was what she called me. Her neighbor, her target, her trash. It wasn't just fraud anymore. It wasn't just intimidation. That text showed intent. Malice. She wasn't bluffing her way through petty power games. She was running an operation, one she thought she controlled. Danny's jaw tightened as she read. Calm as she always was, I saw the flicker of anger in her eyes. "That's enough for a warrant, Chief. House, car, financials, storage. We can go wide now." I nodded. "Start with storage. She'll keep the real evidence where she thinks no one will ever look." Boone handed me a small set of keys found clipped to the SUV's visor. One had the stamp of a local self-storage facility. "Unit 218, he said. We drove in silence. The storage complex loomed ahead, rows of orange and blue doors stretching like endless teeth. Anonymous, impersonal, a graveyard for forgotten things, or, in Karen's case, hidden crimes. Boone and his team had already isolated the unit. They hadn't touched it, waiting for me. Evidence chain clean. The key slid into the lock smooth as butter, turned without resistance. Boone cut the facility padlock, then rolled up the metal door. The smell hit first: paper, ink, stale air. Not dust, not mildew, the smell of an office. Inside wasn't furniture or forgotten keepsakes. It was an operation. A desk sat in the corner. Filing cabinets lined the wall, stacks of envelopes, reams of cheap red paper, and in the middle of it all, a high-end commercial printer. The kind you don't buy for printing family photos, the kind you buy to mass-produce intimidation. This was her factory. We pulled open drawers. The first was labeled Oak Street. My files sat at the front, my name, my tax records, copies of every fake violation she'd slapped on my door. Behind mine, files of other neighbors, some still on the block, some long gone. Taped to their files were photocopies of cashed checks, notes about who paid quickly, who resisted, who moved away. My chest tightened as I flipped through them. Victims. Good people bullied into paying thousands for lies. A family that shelled out over $2,000 in a year for unapproved mailbox color and holiday decorations left up too long. One elderly widow threatened with foreclosure over rose bushes. She sold her home. Karen had written soft target in the margin. Danny's hand trembled slightly as she held the file. She profiled them, went after the vulnerable. I looked at the rows of cabinets, each drawer labeled with other neighborhoods: Willow Creek, Pine Ridge Estates, Maple Lane. It wasn't just Oak Street. This woman had built a web across the city, a one-woman crime wave. The last cabinet gave us the crown jewels, forged letterheads from the county clerk's office, fake lien forms, even mock court orders with a judge's photocopied signature. The arrogance was staggering. She hadn't even bothered to lock it. Danny whispered, voice low but sharp. "This is fraud, conspiracy, racketeering, it's all here." I stared at the mountain of evidence, paper, ink, lies, All the tools she used to build her empire of fear. She thought she was untouchable, thought no one would ever peel back the curtain. But curtains always fall. And Karen Van Fleet was about to watch hers collapse in front of an entire courtroom. Everyone thinks scams are about the lies on the surface, the fake notices, the phony seals, the threats in bold print. But the truth of a crime lives in numbers. Money never lies. It always leaves a trail. The financial warrant came back faster than I expected. Danny's team moved like scalpel surgeons, slicing into Karen Van Fleet's life. What they found was worse than I imagined. 3 bank accounts. 2 were almost empty, used for groceries and utilities. The third, however, told the real story. A corporate account tied to one of her shell LLCs. Balance, over $250,000. All of it traced to deposits that matched the checks we'd found in the files. $250,000, wrung out of neighbors through fake fines and forged documents. Fear turned into cash. But it wasn't just money, it was power. She built a shadow government. A network of fear stretching across neighborhoods, built on intimidation and lies. She was queen of her own private empire. I stood in that storage unit, surrounded by paper towers of evidence, and felt the old anger stir. Not the hot, reckless kind, the cold anger. The kind that settles deep in your chest and doesn't go away. She hadn't just targeted me. She'd preyed on the vulnerable, elderly homeowners, families with kids, people too scared of legal action to fight back. She profiled them, labeled them soft targets. That was her mistake. She thought fear was stronger than truth. Danny set her laptop on the desk, screen glowing with fresh data. "Chief, we've got more," text from the burner phone. She turned the screen. Lines of messages scrolled down, from Karen to her hired muscle, to other numbers not yet identified, but one stood out. Board meeting, tonight, 8 p.m., garage. Board meeting, her court, her throne room. The place she gathered her officers and sycophants, handed out orders like a warlord. It was perfect. Danny looked up, eyes sharp behind her glasses. "We've got enough to bury her already. Why risk a raid? Why not just knock on her door with a warrant and drag her in?" Because I knew Karen. She built her life on theatrics. Power through appearances. Fear through spectacle. If we arrested her quietly, she'd twist it into a story. Claim it was harassment. Paint herself as the victim. Some of her neighbors might even believe it. But if we brought her down in front of her own people, if we shattered her crown in the middle of her throne room, there'd be no rewriting the ending. Her empire would collapse in a single night. I looked at Danny. "We're not just going to knock, we're going to raid that meeting. I want every one of her board members to see her in cuffs." She nodded slowly, a small smile tugged at the corner of her mouth. "Public justice, bold, I like it." The plan came together with the precision of a SWAT op, units in unmarked cars, silent approach, entry teams staged in neighbor Duke's backyard, Boone at my side, Danny running command from her vehicle. The warrants were live, house, garage, storage, financials. The evidence was airtight. The case wasn't just strong, it was unbreakable. But still, the hours before the raid stretched long. I sat in my living room as the sun bled orange through the oaks, sipping coffee gone cold. My grandpa's photo sat on the mantel, stern eyes watching. I thought of his words. "Rules serve people, not the other way around." Karen had twisted rules into weapons, bent them into chains, and she'd laughed while she did it. That was ending tonight. By 7:30 we were in place. The street was quiet, but beneath the silence there was a pulse. Officers crouched behind fences. Radios whispered low. The neighborhood had no idea a storm was about to break. I crouched in Duke's backyard with Boone and 3 others. Shadows stretched long across the grass. Through the slats of the fence, I could see Karen's garage. The door was down, lights glowing inside. Voices carried faintly through the thin walls. I raised the directional mic, aimed it at the garage. Karen's voice came through, sharp, cutting. "Unacceptable. He was supposed to be a simple matter. Now he's disappeared, and so have my employees. This reflects poorly on our organization. Our organization. The delusion was staggering. She was still playing queen, still convinced she sat on a throne, even as the ground crumbled beneath her. Danny's voice whispered in my ear through the comms. All units in position, exits covered, we're green on your go. I glanced at Boone. He gave me the smallest nod. Calm, ready. I tightened the strap on my vest, my pulse steady, my jaw set. Move on my signal, I whispered into the radio. Inside, Karen's voice rose again. When I find them, they'll learn a serious lesson about loyalty. That was her last command as queen. Because the next sound she heard was my voice, breaking through the door like thunder. Police, nobody move. The side door crashed open under my hand, and the garage erupted with light, voices, and shock. Police, don't move. My voice cut through the air like a blade. We poured in, me, Boone, and the team, filling the cramped space with presents, weapons leveled, vests gleaming under the fluorescent bulbs. The board meeting froze in place. Karen stood at a makeshift podium, clipboard clutched like a gavel. Her two board members, neighbors I vaguely recognized, sat at a folding table, their eyes wide, knuckles white on the plastic surface. For half a second, no one moved. Then Karen's face twisted, confusion flooding into outrage. You, she spat, pointing at me. You can't. She didn't finish, because recognition hit her. Recognition and panic. She cuffed me on my own porch, thought she'd humiliated me. But now she was staring at me in tactical gear, flanked by officers, her empire collapsing around her ears. Her voice cracked into a shriek. You have no right. I am the president of this HOA. I demand. Her podium clattered to the floor as she shoved it aside and bolted for the interior door. Fast, desperate, a cornered rat. But Boone was faster. He moved like an oak tree uprooted, cutting off her path. She tried to juke left, wiry and wild, even shoved him with surprising strength. But Boone didn't budge. His hands clamped around her arm like iron. Get your hands off me, she screamed, thrashing, kicking. I'll sue you, I'll take your badge. I walked calmly toward her, pulling out my own set of cuffs. The real kind, steel and authority heavy in my hand. Karen Van Fleet, I said, my voice loud, steady, final. You are under arrest for extortion, conspiracy to commit fraud, racketeering, criminal impersonation, and forgery of a government seal. I snapped one cuff around her wrist. The sound echoed in the garage like a gavel striking wood. Her eyes burned into mine, venomous, wild. You can't do this. The second cuff clicked shut, the last sound of her reign. You can tell it to the judge, I said, turning her toward the others. Her two board members sat frozen, their hands high in the air, terrified. They weren't leaders. They weren't criminals. They were followers, pulled into her orbit by fear and false promises. And now they watched their queen collapse. This is what happens, I said, my voice carrying in the silent garage, when you invent your own laws, when you mock the real ones. This is what happens when you think fear is stronger than truth. Boone held her steady as she thrashed one last time, but the fight had gone out of her. Not her rage, that burned hotter than ever, but the fight. She knew it was over. We led her out the garage door, into the night, where flashing blue and red painted the quiet street. Patrol cars lined the block. Neighbors were already stepping out onto porches, phones in their hands, eyes wide. The queen was in chains. Whispers spread, gasps. Relief. Duke stood in his yard, leaf blower hanging forgotten at his side, his big frame lit up by cruiser lights. He raised his phone, filming as Karen was walked past, her face twisted, spitting curses. You haven't won, she hissed at me as I opened the back door of the patrol car. You'll regret this. I'll burn this whole street down before I let you win. I just looked at her. The door clicked shut, steel locking her inside. I didn't need to say a word. The flashing lights, the officers at her flanks, the silence of her so-called board, they said everything. She'd lost. For the first time in weeks, Oak Street felt different. Lighter. The weight that had pressed down on every porch, every neighbor, every whispered conversation about the HOA lifted as she sat caged in the back of that cruiser. Her reign had ended in spectacle, just like it began. Only this time the whole neighborhood was watching. And they weren't afraid anymore. A month later, I sat on my porch with a mug of coffee, morning sun warming the railing. The air felt different, lighter. Kids' laughter echoed down the block. Duke waved from his mower, his booming laugh carrying across the yards. The young family walked by with their stroller, no fear in their eyes anymore. Oak Street had been restored, and for the first time, it felt like home. But before that peace came the storm, the courtroom. Karen Van Fleet walked in wearing county orange, shackled, her smugness stripped away. No clipboard, no yapping dog, no neighbors to bully. Just a woman exposed for what she really was, a fraud who'd built a castle of paper lies and fear. The prosecution didn't have to work hard. The evidence was overwhelming. The storage unit, the burner phone, the cash bundles labeled with addresses, the SUV full of fake badges, the videos of her officers cuffing me on my own porch, witnesses from across the city, elderly victims, families who'd paid thousands to stop the harassment, stood and told their stories. One old woman, her hands shaking as she held a folder of red notices, looked at the judge and whispered, "She told me if I didn't pay, they'd take my house. So I sold it. I didn't know it was all fake." The judge's face hardened. His gavel cracked once, sharp and final. He called Karen's actions a campaign of intimidation against her own neighbors, a fraud of staggering audacity, a scheme designed to weaponize fear and line her pockets. Then he delivered the sentence. 15 years in federal custody, 3 years supervised release, permanent injunction from ever serving on any HOA, board, or property management role, full forfeiture of all equipment, accounts, and shell corporations, restitution for every victim. She didn't scream, didn't cry. She just glared across the courtroom, venom burning in her eyes. A queen without a crown, sentenced to a kingdom of concrete walls and steel bars. Her 2 hired men pled out. One took a federal firearms charge and stacked state time for impersonation and kidnapping. The other folded quicker, testifying in exchange for fewer years. But Karen, she had no allies left. Her board abandoned her. Her neighbors watched her hauled away in shackles. The empire she built on fear had collapsed into dust. The state set up a hotline. Calls poured in. Victims from other neighborhoods, Willow Creek, Pine Ridge Estates, Maple Lane, all telling the same story. Red notices, fake fines, threats of liens. One by one, the copycat HOAs fell. The scam was over. Back on Oak Street, life began to heal. No more notes tucked under wipers. No more strangers with clipboards on the sidewalk. No more whispers about the HOA in hushed voices over fences. The fear had broken. Inside my home, the last moving box finally disappeared. On the mantel sat my grandpa's photo, his eyes stern but kind. I thought of his words, "Rules serve people, not the other way around." Karen had worshipped rules as weapons, twisted them into chains, and for a time she'd succeeded, but fear never lasts when truth steps in. On my desk at the station now sits one of her tin badges, not as a trophy, as a tool, a replica we use in training, how to spot fakes, how to record evidence, how to build a clean case step by step, a reminder that a badge isn't a costume, it's trust, it's work, it's proof. And on Oak Street, the silence I bought this house for has returned, not the brittle silence of fear, the earned silence of peace. Doors open again, neighbors laugh across lawns, kids ride bikes without mothers glancing nervously toward clipboards. My castle is mine again, not because of walls or locks, but because the line is clear. The fence line is guarded, and if anyone ever tries to play queen on this block again, they won't find scared neighbors. They'll find the chief of police. And this time, no one will mistake paper for power.